Thanks, Eric. We have with us today Sandy Johnson, a livestock production specialist, and she's here to talk about a new veterinarian feed directive. Sandy, can you tell us some products that will be affected by this new regulation?
Well, the veterinary feed directive specifically applies to those things, antimicrobials that are in the feed, and it would also include, say, water or milk replacer. And so any type of, it's generally tetracyclines and penicillins that are considered important from a human medicine standpoint that will be impacted. Some of our products that are used hardly at all or exclusively in animals, such as our ionophores, their use will remain the same.
Mm-hmm. When will this go into effect?
Well, there will be some changes that we'll see immediately in October of this year, because there's really probably multiple things that are happening. Now, one is following through with the veterinary feed directive, which says we will follow what's on the label for this product, and the veterinarian will essentially think of the veterinary feed directive like a prescription. Mm-hmm. And so he will work with the producer in determining that appropriate use, and we'll have that paperwork in place in order to use that product based on what's on the label. Now, the second thing that will be changing, and this will be happening later next year, is that for some of these products, there's been a label claim that says they might improve feed efficiency or rate of growth. The manufacturers have agreed to remove those label claims, and those changes will occur then later next year. I think they're trying to do that in a short time period in November, December to, use up what's made and make it work for the manufacturers.
Right. And will there have to be a vet on site for these regulations then, or?
That's a good question. An important part of this whole process will be what's known as the veterinary patient-client relationship. Mm-hmm. And so the veterinarian, as the one being responsible for prescribing this, let's say, is going to need to know enough about your animals or your operation, either by examining those individual animals or being familiar with your facility, so that they're confident in how they will be used and applied. That's going to be different. What that means for operations will vary based on what that working relationship is and how often the veterinarian is there anyway. And when there's a question about what that truly means, the states, in my understanding, all of the states have a definition of what that is. So each state's veterinarians will follow their state guidelines for that. But we know in general that they've got to know something about those animals and how they're managed in order to be confident that these products will be used as intended. And, if you just think about it, if you were the one essentially responsible for how these were used, you'd want to know something before you just send it out the doors. The thing that we should recognize is that this is a great opportunity then to improve the working relationships between producers and veterinarians to really do as good a job as possible in using antibiotics strategically to achieve a goal, but not spending more money on antibiotics than what might be effective.
With that, besides having the relationship, what else does this might mean to a cattle producer?
Well, a couple things. One is there's paperwork involved, okay, and essentially the veterinary feed directive will include some information, as you might suspect, about who's and what's in the animals. And so then both the producer, the veterinarian, and the feed dealer will all have to keep track of that paperwork for a period of 2 years.
So keeping records and paperwork will be very important?
That's right. Now, it is apparent that you're able to send an electronic copy. The vet could email or fax the directive to the feed dealer, and I think then they have to follow with a paper copy. But certainly they're using electronic communication. and recognizing newer forms of keeping those records. But the point is they do have to keep them and be available for inspection should anyone, show up and ask about it.
So I know that you've mentioned some labeling already, but can you just elaborate a little bit more on the labeling that will be changed with the regulation?
Right. So when a manufacturer or a company puts a product out there for a specific use, they have to go through all this approval, and they make claims on what this product will do.
Right.
Now, over the course of time, there's instances where we've tried to use things that they didn't necessarily have a label claim for.
Mm-hmm.
And one example of that might be the use of something like chlorotetracycline to help control foot rot problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that has never been on the label. It's an attempt that has been used at times to help control those issues, but there was never a label claim.
Right.
And so that type of use is going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so some producers might feel frustrated with that, but part of the reason some of these things don't go on the label is because that it may not be that the manufacturer ever thought they could demonstrate enough change with that to even put it on the label.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there could be some heartburn over some of those things, but I think in the long run it's going to be better for the industry, and we're going to find that we can use good animal husbandry methods that is going to help us most of the time. And maybe we'll learn about other ways to help control some of those low-grade issues that we've perhaps relied too quickly on the use of an antibiotic.
And with talking about products, will there be any impact in injectable products?
Right now, this regulation is just aimed at feed-grade antibiotics, the penicillin and LA200 type of thing that you might get without a prescription. I think those things will still be available for now.
Right.
Now, that could change in the future, but right now those things are still available. Doesn't impact vaccines or, like I said, any other injectable antibiotics. But again, as these things have a cost, working with our veterinarian to decide when and how to use them is probably a good plan anyway. So one of the things that producers need to make sure to do is if you don't have a good working relationship with your veterinarian, don't wait till you've got sick animals and find out you can't get something as quickly as you're normally expecting to do. Get a good working relationship with your veterinarian. Use them as a key partner in developing a health management plan, and that is going to be something that's always valuable to help producers address the health and welfare of their animals as well as improve the profitability and sustainability of their operation.
Now that you've mentioned that, what can producers take away from this interview, and what should be the next step that they should take?
Well, producers should think about where they use feed-grade antibiotics in their operation currently, and then I would be visiting with my veterinarian about how they're going to handle the paperwork for, if I'm talking to my veterinarian, okay, for what you know about me right now, if this happens, what are we going to do? So if we wean calves, are we going to wait to see some issues before we start some medicated crumbles? Have that plan in place now. Know what paperwork and things need to take place. There's going to be some learning for everybody in this. So now is the time to start working on understanding what those logistics will be, how it will work through your veterinary office. I don't think it'll be that hard, but it's something new that we need to learn about. And, we should expect that, we always want to have some practice before we might have to do something. If we're playing a sport, we always practice before the game. Well, the practice before this game is visiting with your veterinarian about that process and how it will impact what your routine plans have been. And if you do that, I think you won't have too much trouble in working with this new regulation.
So producers, you will have to work closely with your veterinarian if you want to continue using antibiotics. Thanks, Sandy.
Well, I'm glad to be able to visit.
That was K-State's livestock production specialist, Sandy Johnson. For Agriculture Today, I'm Charles C. Craig.